Ever since I did a guide on how to unlock Prophet's cyberpunk body, I've been bombarded with requests for one specialist challenge in particular. Nomad's Chupacabra body challenge. Rapidly kill 2 enemies shortly after using Rejack 2 times. If you're familiar with how Rejack works, you'll see this as a fitting title. The Chupacabra is a legendary beast that may or may not exist. In other words, it's extremely rare. If you've ever used Rejack before, you'll know that it's absolutely wank on the cob. And as such, maybe they intended for the reward for this challenge to be rare as well. So to understand how we achieve double kills, or hell, even single kills with the Rejack ability, let's first take an in-depth look at how it works and what exactly it does. If you happen to play the beta for Black Ops 3, you may recall that Rejack was hands down one of the best abilities in the game. That's because Rejack used to do a whole slew of things it no longer can. First, and the main reason everyone called it overpowered, it kept your score streaks and your gun streaks. So that meant if you were 50 points away from, say, a UAV and got put into Rejack, you'd still be 50 points away when you came back. Not to mention a lot of pub stompers use this to get easy nuclear medals. If you got put into Rejack on a 15 gun streak, for example, you'd still be on that 15 gun streak upon rejacking. Now, David Vonderhaar called this a glitch and said it was never intended to do either of these things. Second of all, if you got put into Rejack in the beta, you did not get a death. If you died after rejacking, you did. Now, however, you do get a death when you're put into Rejack. Meaning, if you die, go into Rejack, and then die again, you now have 2 deaths instantly. In the beta, you are also allowed to earn Rejack in 2 minutes flat without doing anything. It's now longer, but I'll go over that in a second. Also in the beta, you could get up from Rejack in 1 second flat. Now it takes 1.5 seconds. Lastly, if you died with your secondary weapon in your hand while going into Rejack, you'd come out of Rejack with your primary weapon out, which could be very handy. And now, however, if you die with your secondary weapon out, you'll come out of Rejack with it out as well. If you ask the typical player what the worst specialist ability is in this game, they'll tell you Rejack. So what once was considered too overpowered now is a mere shell of its former self. So what is Rejack good for now? Well, one use is for objective play. If you get killed while capping a flag, for instance, you can Rejack and continue on capping. The same applies for kill confirmed. If you die, your tag appears, but if you Rejack, you will instantly gobble up that tag. It could also be useful in uplane. If you die in the midst of trying to score, you can Rejack, grab the ball again, and continue on your way. Lastly, if you're planting or disarming a bomb in a mode such as demolition, you can Rejack and continue on as if nothing happened. Of course, all these scenarios are assuming you don't get cold-cocked into oblivion instantly upon Rejacking. Another benefit to Rejack is that it can be used as a makeshift speed reload, and this isn't very practical at all, but it can be handy once in a while. If you have 1 bullet left in your clip, for example, and you have ammo in reserve and get put into Rejack, you'll come out of the smoke with a full clip. The only stipulation is that you have to have ammo in reserve for this to work. So if you get put into Rejack with 0 bullets left altogether, you'll come out of Rejack with, well, 0 bullets. You have to have the ammo available in reserve for this to work. Most people will tell you that getting single kills with Rejack is hard enough, and that getting double kills is near impossible. With a little strategy, however, you may just be in luck. So first of all, let's talk durations of Rejack. Not many people seem to be aware of this, but they actually nerfed and buffed specialist abilities and weapons. What I mean by that is, depending on the game mode you play, you earn them faster or slower. For instance, in Domination without doing diddly squat, you earn Rejack in 4 minutes and 45 seconds, and that is painfully slow. In Free-For-All, however, you earn Rejack in 2 minutes and 54 seconds. That's a heck of a decrease in time it takes to acquire. If you run the Overclock perk in Free-For-All, which lets you earn abilities or weapons even faster, it'll only take 2 minutes flat to achieve Rejack. And as such, I highly recommend Overclock when going for these specialist challenges. Shaving almost a full minute off in time it takes to acquire is extremely helpful. Now allow me to cover the length of time you have to get a grudge medal, which is accomplished if you get a kill right after Rejacking. I did quite a bit of private match testing and was able to pinpoint a very good estimate of how long you have. I'll show you 3 examples here. On this first attempt, from right when the screen turns green and you start to come out of Rejack until the kill feed starts to first show up for my kill, it was 5.15 seconds. And this did count as a grudge medal. Next, using the same measurement times, I waited a little bit longer, and this time it was 6.23 seconds. Unfortunately, this did not reward a grudge medal, so we know for sure that you have to get a grudge medal in under 6.23 seconds. Doing the same test one more time revealed a time of 5.783 seconds. And this did reward a grudge medal. I couldn't time it just right to go in between the 6.23 seconds and the 5.783 seconds. So I'll just conclude that you have exactly 5.783 seconds or less to achieve a single or double kill after rejacking to complete these challenges. The biggest issue with completing both the single and double kill challenges is what happens when you're actually put into rejack. So when you rejack, a very visible green cloud of smoke appears, and this easily alerts the enemy as to where you are, and they can simply gun you down again when you stand back up. Sadly, if your enemy stands in this cloud, they can clearly see you and kill you instantly. You are not allowed to turn at all while put into rejack, so it's very difficult to gauge if there are enemies camping your smoke. You can see slightly in your peripheral view, but it's difficult. I should note that if you let the countdown expire, you'll simply respawn, but you'll lose your rejack ability altogether. Instead, you're at least rewarded with half a meter full towards your next rejack. You'll only have 3.8 seconds to decide to use the ability or lose it. If you suspect there are people camping their dick off outside your smoke, it's probably wise to respawn and waste your rejack, rather than suffer a second death instantly. So I see two issues here. Number one, people aren't fooled by the green smoke. In the beta or when the game first came out, most people probably didn't know what that cloud of smoke was. But that's not the case anymore. Number two, most of the time you're put into rejack, it's in close quarters combat. Obviously, someone just killed you and will be extremely close to you and ready to pounce for a second kill. So let's focus on remedying both of these issues. First of all, the close quarters aspect. This is the biggest issue in my opinion. Typically, you don't get to choose when you fall into rejack, which instantly puts you at a disadvantage. So let's change that. Most people don't realize this, but you can suicide yourself into rejack, and we can use that to our tactical advantage. I tested extensively the methods in which you can put yourself into rejack. Oddly, a cooked frag grenade will not work, only a thrown one. Otherwise, all explosives in the game will trigger rejack. That includes thermite grenades, trip mines, Semtex grenades, C4, and even the XM53 rocket launcher. Out of all the mentioned explosives, the Semtex grenade is probably the most ideal since it's the easiest to deploy and the fastest to put you into rejack. The idea here is to pick an ideal location to suicide rejack and then reap the benefits. Just as an example, one of the house windows on Nuketown. If you suicide in one of these windows when you have rejack available, you now can see a majority of the map. You obviously don't have to worry about being instantly killed since you dictated the initiation of rejack. You now have at least 5.7 seconds to kill someone, or two people if the opportunity arises. Long range is ideal for this tactic, as it keeps you out of the trenches of combat and gives you a clear line of sight of the battlefield. You can also use it in high traffic areas. Of course, you don't want to suicide rejack in plain view. Utilize coverage to your advantage. Again, using Nuketown as an example, the buses in the middle of the map offer great protection, and you know that enemies will be coming from the other side. So hide behind one, suicide rejack, and then peek around the bus and pick off some enemies. Again, this allows you to control the situation, rather than just being placed into rejack by your enemy at their convenience. So now let's discuss the green smoke issue. Since rejack is no longer an element of surprise, we're going to try to spice it up a notch. You'll want to run the thermal scope, 2 smoke grenades, and a Semtex grenade. The smoke grenades are incredibly useful in this game. If you weren't aware of this, allies within the smoke cannot be detected on an enemy minimap. The idea here is to incorporate the suicide rejack tactic into this one as well. What you want to do is find an ideal location on the map where you expect enemies to be. Throw your Semtex against the surface and go up next to it. Then, while it's detonating, toss your 2 smoke grenades down. As you toss the second one, your Semtex will explode and put you into rejack. Instantly come out of it and use your thermal scope to cut through the smoke and see if you can pick off some enemies. Your smoke will completely cover the entire area. Not only this, your enemies won't see your green rejack smoke, so they'll have no idea you were even in rejack. The smoke is anywhere from extremely difficult to impossible to see through. Of course, you obviously aren't protected from bullets while inside the cloud, but your enemies blindly firing into it are far more likely to miss you. There's one more trick you can utilize to aid you in your double kills, and that's C4. Let me first tell you that C4 works a bit oddly with rejack. First of all, you can deploy C4 and have it persist through a rejack. Since you don't actually respawn, your thrown C4 will never go away. At first, I had this great idea of detonating it right when you fall into the rejack position, but before you emerge from the smoke, and unfortunately, this doesn't work. You can detonate it here, but it does absolutely 0 damage. You can see here that my 2 test dummies take no damage when I detonate it from the down position. It lets you detonate, it does blow up, but it does no damage. What does work, however, is as soon as you emerge from the smoke. Since C4s alert you of enemies in the vicinity, you could run 2 C4s, throw them on objective points such as the B flag, and then pull out an XM53 rocket launcher. With your launcher out, have it ready to suicide you at a moment's notice. As soon as you see someone coming towards where you chucked your C4s, suicide yourself. Then, instantly pop out of the rejack and detonate the C4. With a little luck, you may just achieve a double kill. By the way, this is the only time I'd advise using the XM53 launcher to put you into a suicide rejack. As I mentioned earlier, if you rejack with a secondary weapon out, you'll come out of rejack with the same weapon. While it is possible to suicide with the launcher, rejack, and then swap to your primary and get a kill, it's far more easier to suicide via a thrown explosive and have your primary at the ready. Lastly, let's discuss game modes. If you're struggling with the single rejack kills, I highly suggest you play free-for-all. As I mentioned, you earn rejack insanely fast in free-for-all mode, and with the overclock perk, you can get the ability every 3 kills. So let's say you come in first place, that's 30 kills. You can potentially earn rejack 10 times in a single match. It's no exaggeration when I tell you that you can typically earn at least 5 grudge medals in a single free-for-all match. The fact that you're more than likely to only have one guy watching your downed rejack body rather than 2 or more is also a benefit. Not to mention that free-for-all is a fast-paced game mode, so half the time the person that put you into rejack won't even wait for you to come out of it. If there's 2 enemies nearby and you're in rejack mode, they're more than likely going to shoot each other rather than wait to see if you respawn out of rejack. And due to the chaotic spawns, you're also likely to encounter double kill scenarios more often than not. Ground War is also an ideal game mode to play, as is the Chaos Mosh Pit, and in particular Nuketown. The more enemies, such as in Ground War, and the smaller the maps, such as in the Chaos Mosh Pit, equals more opportunities for double kills. As for weapon choice, I personally enjoy LMGs. Since you have a good 5.7 seconds to get your 2 kills after rejacking, you don't want to be caught with your pants down by running out of ammo. An LMG will ensure you have enough bullets to properly dispose of 2 enemies, should the opportunity arise. Many people also simply emerge from rejack smoke like it's a walk in the park. Please don't do this. You want to blast out of there like you've got Boba Fett's jetpack equipped. As soon as you're able to, double jump high into the air and rain death upon your enemies. The higher you jump and the faster you're moving, the harder you are to hit. Make it difficult for your enemies, not easier. And that's all there is to it. Instead of allowing your enemies to dictate your rejack situation, suicide and pick your own battles, whether that be from a high overwatch point or behind cover in an area where you know people are bound to be coming from. Or couple this suicide rejack tactic with extra smoke via smoke grenades and a thermoscope to highlight your enemies before they can see you. Lastly, you could set up some proximity mine traps with C4. Simply suicide yourself with a secondary XM53 launcher and detonate the heavy-duty explosives immediately upon emerging from rejack in hopes of a double kill. If all else fails, play free-for-all to ensure multiple chances of rejacking. You can confidently utilize any of these tactics I've outlined in this video to aid you in your single and double rejack kills. Despite being nerfed into oblivion, rejack can once again offer you some combat advantages, but only if you use the correct tactics.